So two stories that are particularly linked to space and place and my childhood in Las Vegas, New Mexico, occur when I'm about 7 years old. So one of the stories has to do with, for some reason, I was home and my mother and I were making cookies. And towards the end of the afternoon, I remember that she picked me up and she put me on the kitchen counter, which was unusual because my mother would not have allowed people to sit on the counter. But I remember she had me on the counter and she said to me, "Margie, I'm going to teach you a poem." And she said, "If a job is once begun, be it great or be it small, do it right or not at all." And we went through several practices until she was sure that I had learned it. And then she said to me, "So let me tell you why I think this story is important." She said, "So if you have a job, if I give you a job to do, like washing this floor, like washing the kitchen floor," she said, "so I want you to wash all of the floor," she said, "but," she said, "I want you to pay attention to the corners and to the edges." She said, "Because that's the way that that's the way that you wash a floor, the right way." And so years later, I can remember when I would be at Harvard and doing some schoolwork, and I would remember my mother's voice, right? What makes us excellent in my mother's eyes was the work that we produce, right? It is that the work speaks for us. And it's something that I really have tried to inculcate into my students and into my girls, right? The work speaks for you.
I get from my mom a little bit of crazy, but it's good crazy. And it is, my mom over prepares for things. And the sort of stress and anxiety of really wanting to do well, show your best work, puts this, over preparation into almost anything she does. And she's passed some of that down to me. Your work will speak for itself. Like, this is what will carry your name, right? And so she over prepares, and I tend to do that.
I remember when we were little, we used to sit on the back of the toilet, kind of like a horse, and she would braid our hair, she would comb her hair, whatever she would do, and she would, in this very similar way that her Mascaras piece talks about, the way that her mom braided her hair, she would tell us stories about, being proud of who you are and being what it meant to be Latina or biracial or, hardworking. And so she would always remind me that there were a lot of people that came before me, that my grandparents, my great-grandparents, that did a lot of hard work and literally blood, sweat, and tears to get us where our family is, and that I had a duty. It was my responsibility to carry that on and to be proud of that work.
My mother was from Whitewater, New Mexico, and my father from Santa Rita, which was nearby. They moved to Las Vegas in 1946. I was born there in 48. I'm the second of 3 children. My brother, Richard, or Dickie, is older, and Maria Elena is 1 year younger than I am. My parents had met in southern New Mexico. They graduated from Hurley High School. And my mother was an excellent student. She was at the top of the class. At the time that I'm born, my dad is working 3 jobs. My dad is a bartender. He's working in, I believe he's working in a tire store. There was very little money. Even into my early teens, life in Las Vegas, New Mexico was still segregated. And it is even today. Even though the population was predominantly Mexican American, we called ourselves Spanish or Nuevo Mexicanos. The better spaces in town were reserved for Anglos or whites. The other spaces were for us, the Nuevo Mexicanos. In the 60s, the debates and benefits of the civil rights movement hadn't yet reached Las Vegas. The Catholic school that we went to was across the street from the public library, the Carnegie Public Library. On a regular basis, I would go to the library and dutifully check out books and read the books. And the day came when I wanted to check out a book from another part of the library. And when I came, the librarian said, "You can't check out these books because they're from the adult section." And it was like, another rule. I didn't know there was this rule. And so I went home and I told my mom, right? They didn't let me check out this book. And so one day I remember she came to my classroom and she took me out. We walk up the sidewalk, up the stairs to the library, and I can just visualize myself. She has my hand. We're walking up the stairs. She has not told me what we're doing. My heart is beating. I don't know if I'm in trouble. I don't know my mother did not do these things. This was a singular day. So I can remember she opens the door, we go in, and at the desk, the librarian's desk, she asks to speak to the librarian. The librarian comes and she says, "This is my daughter, and I want you to get her library card, and on it, I want you to write that she has my permission to check out any book in this library." So I'm like below the top of the desk where my eyes are, right? I know that I'm about that height. And I'm looking at my mom and I'm looking at the librarian. And for me, this is a moment of power. This is a moment of a person advocating for me in a way that is just like, this is life altering because of what books will represent to me in my life. In that moment, I felt I had books. And what my mom was saying to me was that books were not prohibited, right? That was such a huge message, right? That books were a good. And by that I mean both a thing, but also a good thing, a normative, a value judgment that she was making about things of value. What value, what matters in the world. Books matter in the world. Books have been central to my life since childhood. By the time that Maria Elena and I are in high school, we're living in Albuquerque. And we are now in public school. And she and I were at Highland High School. So I remember one day at Highland High School that I was called to the counseling office. So over the PA, there was an announcement. And I thought it had to do with some of my work that I did there. And I was called into the head counselor's office. And she was seated behind her desk, and I was seated in front. And she pushed, I can still visualize her. She pushed a piece of paper and she said, "Here are your ACT scores." And I remember I picked them up and I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, wow, I didn't do so well. Because as I recall, they were in the lower 90%. And I think the ACT is actually, you get a number, but I remember that there was a percentile. And she said, "We thought there was a mistake, and so we called the testing service. And there's no mistake." And I was sort of like deflated. I thought, oh, there's no mistake. This is what I got. And she said, "This is really high. I get that I've been called in because they thought there was a mistake because this was too high. And there was just this, oh my goodness, we are not aligned in terms of how we see each other. She then says to me, well, I have a surprise for you because we have a recruiter here from a college. She said, and you can see him right now. His first name was Frank. And she said, and he's from the College of Artesia. So the College of Artesia did not exist. It was scheduled to open in October of 1966. So I went in and I talked with this recruiter, and he said to me, I can accept you right now and give you a full scholarship. And so all of this is in a fog for me. And so I go home and I say to my mom and dad, well, this is what happened. And I met with this recruiter, and he accepted me and he gave me a full scholarship. I did very well at the College of Artesia, and my parents told me that there was not enough money for me to continue. And so I quit school and I came home and began working. And I would eventually then go for 2 semesters to the University of Albuquerque, which was a Catholic school. Again, I did very well at the University of Albuquerque. Then I did 1 semester at the College of Santa Fe. By that time, I had decided that, like my father, I would go into social work. And the College of Santa Fe had a social work program that was aligned with San Diego State University. I then go to San Diego State University. I enroll in social work classes, and I'm just not suited for them. And by chance, I enroll in a 2-semester class on constitutional law. And my professor was a man named Richard Stumpf. So Professor Stumpf in the 2nd semester said to me, are you thinking about law school? I said, no, I'm not. And he said, well, you should. He said, and I'll write you a letter. And so in 1973, I arrive at Harvard, where I was the first Latina to be admitted to the law school. At the time, there was much activity in the U.S. pertaining to civil rights and civil liberties. Bakke versus the University of California, the affirmative action case, was headed to the U.S. Supreme Court. There were so many divisions and inequalities based on race, and the collision of worlds touched me deeply and motivated my activism. I flourished in that activism as I found my voice and formed my views. Elite schools like Harvard, did we have a moral claim on being there? Did we have a constitutional claim that could be made? And I felt that I was not only defending my right to be there, but that I was defending really this national project of making the society more open and less segregated. The year that I graduated, the Supreme Court decided what was to become the leading case on affirmative action, on allowing the use of race in considering the admission of students. So virtually through a lot of the time that I was at Harvard, students were debating these cases. It was extremely prominent. I found myself debating this policy and the law of this policy, both in sort of conversations, but one instance that I remember, I was part of an organization called the Board of Student Advisors, which is called BSA, or the board, runs many of the co-curricular activities that are mandatory for the students. And I remember on one occasion debating very vigorously with a number of the other board members. A debate that went on through a good part of the afternoon into the evening. At the end of the year, the Board of Student Advisors had an annual banquet with the dean of the law school. And the board had presents for the officers, for the president and for me. And they had two gifts for me. One was a beautiful leather passport cover, and the other one was a wooden high chair, like you would put in a children's make-believe house, a little high chair. It's maybe 4 inches high. And they gave that to me, they said, because I was such a crybaby about affirmative action. So at this banquet in which the officers and the officers of the incoming class were on a dais with the dean, I was sitting next to the dean. This was both, we were both being honored and thanked for the work that we had done. And I think that I was being humiliated for the role that I had played in really trying, first of all, I was trying to push the board itself to have more students of color. I was one of the first students of color on the board. But also, I think that much of Harvard expected us to be there, to be grateful, and to be quiet. I was not to be that student. So I treasure that high chair. I mean, the high chair, I think, was meant to belittle me, to make fun of me. I have been a beneficiary of affirmative action. My family has been a beneficiary, my extended family, my community. But Harvard is the primary beneficiary of affirmative action. Harvard benefited by allowing in new populations of students. Harvard is a more just place. Harvard is a more rigorous place. Harvard can now go out and say that in fact it has shed itself of the discriminatory, oppressive practices that it engaged in for 160 of its 200 years, because students of color were not accepted until about 40 years ago. Its position as an educational institution really pivots on being able to claim some morality. And that morality is partially given to it by the students of color. And more recently, LGBT students that have been accepted. And more recently, they're accepting more students with disabilities. And in that wave, and it's only since 1950 that they started accepting women. Evidence of the fact that I was one of the first. The certificate that I got for the Frederick Sheldon is written in male pronouns. Him and his and he. And what they have done is they have taken a typewriter and they have marked those off. And they have put she and they have put her in place of the male pronouns. But I treasure that because, again, it is evidence of this change that was being made from male pronouns to female pronouns, right? From a world where someone like me, that Margaret Montoya would win this award and then travel around the world. A position opened up at the law school. I applied for it and I got it. My article, Máscaras, Trenzas y Greñas, Unmasking the Self While Unbraiding Latina Stories and Legal Discourse, was inspired by a California court case in 1946 involving Josephine Chavez, a Mexican-American young woman. When I get to Harvard Law School, on literally the first case that I read has to do with a criminal defendant who is a Latina in California. So she's been charged with manslaughter because she has given birth over a toilet. The baby has fallen and dies during the delivery. This was a catastrophically tragic case. And it becomes, first of all, the way that I become verbal in that classroom. So I raise my hand and I try to bring into the discussion really the reality of her life, of giving birth in silence, of that her own identity, her own personhood really was not part of the litigation. That she gets reduced down to a woman who would murder a baby. That case then becomes the basis for my first article as a professor, an article then that becomes very important in my academic life, an article that is about autobiography. It's bilingual in that I use just a handful of Spanish words, but it breaks ground in legal scholarship because there had never been articles that were bilingual, that were written by a Latina. I mean, there were many things about the article that were distinctive.
That article came to me through a colleague that said, hey, have you read this article? Because we were trying to make sense, as the very few Latinos that were in my undergraduate school, of what it meant to be a person of color in white space in academia. And they said, hey, there's this wonderful article that talks about Latinas at Harvard trying to make sense. And so it came to me and I said, you're not gonna believe this. This is my aunt. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah. So then I remember reading it and I was crying reading the article because for two reasons. One, that I was reading my aunt's work and that the universe gifted it to me in a very different way. And two, that I was going through the same struggle she was 20 years later and that so little had changed.
So I wrote my, this first article in 1992, 93, so it was published in 1994. And so what I do is I propose 3 different metaphors: braids, masks, and then the unbraiding is the greñas, which is messy hair. And so what I'm juxtaposing is the mask as the set of choices that we make about our appearance. And within that metaphor, within that framework, I'm saying there's over here the braid, which is my mother wanting to tame my hair, my mother giving us messages about that it matters what we look like in public space. And then over here are the greñas, where I've undone my braids. I've undone them and I've just let my hair loose. This juxtaposition of braids to greñas, of braids to messy hair, is very much this idea of how assimilated, how controlled am I going to be, or how disruptive, in your face, ethnic am I going to be. And so it's part of a new school of scholarship written by faculty of color, by law professors of color, using autobiography, using stories, using the lived experiences of people as a way of doing legal analysis. I really felt that the law school should embrace its diversity as a signature characteristic of the law school, that this really is what we should be known for.
I was a senior researcher in mathematics in Mexico City at the National University of Mexico. And we met on a blind date. It didn't start out real well. We went to a taco place that I know they have very good tacos, but in the metro station in Chapultepec Park.
Now, wait a minute. He's taken me for tacos to a metro station. So it was like, and in my head, I'm thinking, well, this guy is either interesting or he's cheap, right? It's like one or the other. Then we went dancing at a discotheque, and he knew all of the lyrics to all of the rock music. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting that here's this mathematician who knows rock music. Well, by the end of the evening, he said to me,
Why don't we go to Acapulco? You want to go to Acapulco?
Acapulco, ¿qué piensas? Right? So we took off in his car, in his Volkswagen, went to Acapulco.
I don't know why I ended up taking her to that taco stand in Chapultepec metro station.
That's what, now 37 years later? So we've been a couple ever since that blind date.
Tacos were damn good, I guess.
When I think of my tia, my tío, really, when it getting heated and these conversations getting really spirited, it always, for my mind, I remember, it was during holidays when we'd come together around Trivial Pursuit. I didn't know if they were mad at each other or what was going on, but it was just this beautiful exchange of expertise that they both had.
I fell in love. I've been in love for 37 years.
Margaret was a terrific mother, is still a terrific mother. Why did I use was? Because they're grown up, I guess, right?
I think I am a worrier like her, you know, in terms of my mom role. I find myself saying things that when I was little, I'm like, gosh, Mom, it's fine. Why are you so concerned about, don't worry about that.
But there's no question that a price was paid by my daughters for having me as involved as I was nationally. But at the same time, I was trying to do this work for them, that I wanted them to have a well-developed understanding of who they were as brown girls, that color, that language, that race and nationality were all part of who we were.
I mean, I'm stubborn like my mom. I argue like my mother. I'm not formally trained as a lawyer the way she is, but I still will argue till I'm out of breath.
She's huge. And she's my mom. She's a great cook. I mean, like a chef. Like, she will straight up cook an amazing 5-course, 7-course meal. And I mean, and it, like she does, puts everything into it, right? And so and she's meticulous about, this is how it's gonna taste, this is how it's gonna look, the presentation, everything.
She made every costume I think I wore for Halloween and for like school projects, and she's actually at home, maybe not right this minute, but she was working on a costume for our family and for my niece, and like she loves to sew and to paint. She makes like Guadalupanas. She's really good at what we consider traditional women's work and women's tasks, despite also being this like trailblazing Harvard law graduate and lawyer and full-time worker. She is still very much the like Mexican mom.
So this is the bicentennial year for Harvard. So Harvard opened in 1817. And so it's been open 200 years. It just had its 200th graduating class. And the dean has commissioned a film for the bicentennial, and I was asked to be a part of the film. And so when the dean wrote to me, I wrote and I said that I did not think that I could participate effectively in this project because I'm very ambivalent about Harvard, that I have always felt that I am morally compromised by being associated with Harvard, because Harvard represents everything I have worked against. Harvard represents exclusivity, elitism, inequality. It represents the white world in a way that I feel that I am a representative of the world of color. And when I was there, I was reminded many times that students of color had come in through a back door. That because we had gotten in through the policy that was then called affirmative action, that it was another door had been opened for us. It wasn't the front door that everyone else had gone in through. And when I was there, I was a fierce, vocal defender and advocate of affirmative action.
I say she's revolutionary because she takes all these very difficult topics to a whole new level in such an easy way for all the people. And I feel that when people hear her speak, they think this girl is above and beyond her times, but she isn't. She's like right where she needs to be. But she's authentic and brave. But my word, that when I think about her, I think she's revolutionary because of all the things and of all the barriers. And here she is as this authentic woman with a lot of power. And I think that how she touches others in that very gentle way is the real lesson. You know, how she does that is the beauty of her skill or her gift. She was still able to make so many important changes in a time when I think the politics and the color of your skin and you being one of the very few Latinas to be in Ivy Leagues and that you didn't have a voice, and then she actually brought voice to us. And so that's something that really needs to be highlighted because I think that is her legend.
If I were to sum up Professor Montoya in one word, it'd probably be gracious. Because she is a very gracious person. She's very lovely, in both her professional work and her personal work. She's very passionate, very devoted to helping the community, and all while maintaining a very positive attitude.
It's, I think particularly because I have taken a baton from her, so to speak, and am moving forward in work that she is so passionate. And I also share that passion, and so I think that must be special. I mean, I've thought about that in terms of my kids, wondering what they're going to grow up to do and become, and that's special to at least that I feel very honored to carry this baton and move her work forward.
I have the perfect role model in front of me. The success that I want for my life is a mirror of what she's experienced, everything that she's done, her impact on the community, and her experience is everything that I want to carry on that legacy. And I think about the choices that I make as an adult, and as I decide, everything that I do is based on her, like who she is and what she's done.
I really do believe, that she's the most incredible person that I know. Right, and I know some incredible people too, but she's the most incredible.
So a video of this type is a singular honor, and I'm very grateful to the filmmakers. But a film like this singles someone out. my work has been collective and collaborative, and I really hope that this becomes a vehicle to hear other people's stories, to really see that, in fact, the braid that really has been the metaphor for this film is a braid that is not made up of my stories and my insights, but it's a much stronger braid if it's made up of many stories. And that's really what I hope the takeaway is, that this becomes a way of opening up the space for other stories and hopefully other videos, many other videos. But I thank you very much.
And I cry because, Margaret, I always cry. But when you're the first one in your family to go to college, and you feel microaggression, but when I wasn't going to college, there's no language for that. But later there was a language. But that you helped me give voice to that. And that is so powerful, because it doesn't only make me a good provider or a good human, it makes me a good mother and a good partner and a good friend. And being able to speak out for your people is a real gift that you have given me.
I don't think, even as much as I try to tell her, that she'll fully ever understand. I mean, the impact that she's had on me, and that she saved me. I mean, for so many reasons. Her role in developing my humanity, I can never fully articulate the gratitude that I have to her for that. Because I'm a better human, a better husband, a better father, a better ambassador to our gente because of her. And for that, I'll never be able to thank her.
I would like to thank you for all the work that you've done and the way you've paved the path for other women of color to pursue a legal profession in particular. And knowing that we are valuable and that what we say does matter in our fields of choice.
It's thank you. I mean, it's sorry. It's thank you. Thank you for giving and giving and giving and catching me always. Thank you, and I love you.
You don't see what we see in you, and that pains me, that I wish you could see yourself through my eyes just for one day, see the brilliant, amazing mother and scholar and professor and community worker and daughter and sister, everything that you are, see it through my eyes and feel the confidence and the brilliance that I see in you. I want to give that to you somehow.